Hello, everyone. My name's Ilya. I'm the host of Web2 Web3 and a co-founder of Sanctor Capital. We invest and back early stage teams in the Web3 space with a primary focus on metaverse and gaming. Andre, if you can mute yourself, please,
Oh
while
yeah,
you're not
sure.
speaking, because I think there's a lot of noise behind you. Um, yeah, so Waypoint Web3 was started as kind of a safe space for everybody to talk about all things Web3 gaming. It's a weekly Twitter spaces. We have done these for I don't know how many weeks now, covering kind of different genres, different ecosystems. Um, and Today we're going to be talking about um, transitioning games from Web2 to Web3, which is kind of an interesting and perhaps sometimes controversial topic as well. We before we get started, I do have to kind of say a few mandatory words. Um, Everything I say is not financial or legal advice. All of the opinions are my own. You may hear names of companies and or assets in which we have invested, have had positions and have positions in, or may hold positions in the future. Um, Also, this is a recorded spaces, so you will be able to, revisit it later on. We post recordings to the spaces as well. And also, in the interest of full disclosure, this space is co-produced by Sanctor Capital and United Gamers, and we have backed United Gamers. I think that covers everything I'm supposed to say before we start, and so I would like to start introducing our speakers. We have some awesome speakers to talk today about kind of this transitioning from Web 2 of a game from Web 2 to Web 3. So speakers, I'll just kind of call on you, and if you can kind of introduce yourself and say a few words about yourself and how you got into Web 3, that'd be great. Um, First up on my screen is Brandon. So Brandon, yeah, if you can introduce yourself.
Great, thanks, Julia. So my name is Brandon. I'm from Gamebusters, where we make casually competitive games. Our first game is called Battle Taps, and we kind of think of it as battleships plus Hearthstone, where you kind of have these two boards, and it's a PvP game where you collect new ships, build up your fleet, and then bring that to battle with another player. I just, I suppose, quickly on my background, before this company, I was at EA for a number of years, working on the Sims series before moving on to Sony, and I was in strategy for a while, and then I left and decided to make some mobile games for family brands until this latest company.
Awesome, thank you. Andre, do you want to go next?
Oh yeah, sure. So hi everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to discuss here. Thanks for Ilya giving me opportunity to join the Twitter space. So my name is Andre. I'm the COO for Metabase. It's like a software that eliminates barrier for players and managers in Web3. It's kind of like a Tinder but for GameFi industry. So I started my journey in early 2021 as a trader and Axie Infinity player. Over time, I built my own scholar consists more than 100 player. And during this time, I met my partner who worked in ICN, which is like Indonesia Crypto Network. One day, ICN contacted by YGG to handle like more than 1,000 scholar here in Indonesia. But YGG never hand off those assets because they have like automation issue. So we decided to bootstrap this thing and create a software to help both managers and player eliminate those difficulties in Web3. And here we are, like we are running the database.
Awesome. And Cobra, what about you?
Hey guys, nice to meet you. So I basically work for Haunted Space. That is a game that has been built to be released on the main console and then made the transition to become part of the Web3 gaming industry. So I work in economy and VC partnerships for this game. And I started in the crypto space by the end of 2017. So I already saw a bear market like that, unfortunately. And I have a background because I was part of a private venture capital. So this experience gave me the chance also to work better and with more knowledge on, tokenomics and the development of the project. So yeah, that's in short about me.
Awesome. And yeah, if we're technically expecting another speaker, but whenever he joins, we'll give him a chance to kind of jump in. I want to start by kind of at the beginning, really. How did you come to the decision that you want to take a game and come to Web3? What made you want to explore the Web3 space, and what does it mean for you when it comes to games?
I suppose I'll go first.
Yeah, anybody can jump in any order. There's no order here.
Right. So this was almost 2 years ago when we were sort of first introduced to the concept of NFTs, and before that, my partner, he had worked on a Bitcoin trading startup before, so had some experience with blockchain. It's always been an interesting area, but since we started working on the game, really didn't have time to go back into that field until we were introduced to the concept of NFTs and the sort of player ownership of assets, which we thought it was a very interesting area. But NFT at that point was a purely sort of technical term. There was not a lot of cultural value attached to it, and we still had a lot of things we had planned for the game. So we didn't revisit it until about 6 months later, after we've shipped some key features to the game. And this concept kept coming back to us, this idea that players can actually own the ships that we are having them grind for, and all the other things that the community that have started doing around the game. So we started talking to a number of sort of friends of friends who's been working at big crypto games during that time to get feedback, to get ideas around like what exactly do they see in blockchain games. I remember talking to Immutable, we talked to Skyweaver, and a bunch of other sort of big name blockchain games, especially from a design perspective, to try to get an idea of how does this impact game design, how does this impact gameplay, especially considering that we have an existing player base that we need to look after. And I think after having a lot of these conversations, we start to realize there are two main things that are really interesting that this technology enables us to do. One is from a community building perspective. There's now an interesting dynamic between what we do as developers and what we can allow players to do as sort of owners of assets. So that's one thing. And the other thing is this whole idea of building something for collectors, right? Like people who collect things from your game, but they might not be players, which is a new sort of motivation for a new type of user. And we thought that was a really intriguing part of a new area that we can design for. So we started focusing on those two areas.
Okay, so I'll take the word. So regarding us, so Hunter Space, basically, as I mentioned before, we started with a traditional gaming company. So we were in the beginning starting to build a game that is going to be released on PlayStation, Xbox, and Steam. But then from the last year, so 2021, we saw that there was a very big hype around the Web3 gaming. And along with the hype, there was also some big problems in the gaming industry that are mainly the low quality of the games or, for example, an uncertain game release. So we decided to join the Web3 space also to bring a change on this market. So basically, we are bringing on the table a very high quality game. And also, as I mentioned before, we are building these games since more than 4 years. So we are going to join this industry with a product that is almost ready. And we are doing that with the knowledge that the crypto gaming space can't really survive only with speculators like in 2021, for example, because the industry will have almost for surely to merge with the traditional gaming industry. So what we are going to do here is trying to merge these two industries and connect the traditional gamer into the Web3 space. So that's the main idea that we have. And yeah, that's pretty much about it. And also, yeah, let's say that the environment and the space had other things that needs to be, better to actually build a good game that is sustainable on the long run. So we take the experience from other old games and the errors and stuff like that, and we merge together with our knowledge to build something that can actually last more years than the last project. So basically, we are building from the ashes of the old projects from 2021.
Okay, for me, so to be honest, it's a hard process to find because for the first time, no one understand Web3 in my circle. So everything need to be like a self-taught. The way I learned by browsing the basic fundamental of blockchain and understanding like what we can do with it. Actually, the things that make me really interesting is because it's something like different with stock. In stock, you can only like trade, right? But in blockchain, you can actually utilize something very different, just like playing a games. So the thing is, uh, when a traditional Web2 games, you actually only earn from the developer side. I mean, only developer who can earn the monies. But from the Web3, actually all people who participate in ecosystem, they can like gain some value out of it, even like sharing by to their friends. And for example, if you're joining like a tournament for kind of like mobile games in Web2, only like a top 10 players in the country who can gain like monetary value or something like a money or like a popularity. But how about the people who gain like number 11, number 15 or 20? They actually don't earn anything. So by utilizing like a Web3, even we are like ranked at top 10,000 or top 100,000, we still earn something. And the way we explore the Web3 ideas actually is from player side itself. So when we are trying to join X Infinity for the first time, for example, it's really difficult. Like we need to install everything by ourselves, like extension, and we still need to like find the Discord. We still need to do the interview, like so many process. Why we not just make it as simple as possible? So while the managers can just pick whatever he want, and for the players and he can pick the asset whatever he want, just make it as simple as like Web2 games, so people actually can join as easy as possible. That's what we want actually to do.
I'm curious, to go back to something I think Brandon you said, about players owning their assets. We see quite a bit of pushback from traditional gamers. I think this happened with Ubisoft, and we also had this similar kind of incident with Stalker, where when a big studio tries to introduce NFTs to kind of a beloved title, the players get up in arms. At the same time, this notion of player ownership has become kind of quite an empowering one. Is this the way to get players to understand NFTs? And if so, like what has been done wrong to this point, and how are you tackling this issue with your games, given that you are building on existing games, and some maybe not for all of you, but for some of you this might be an issue of you have existing user bases. So how do you handle this transition from a user perspective?
So maybe I will start with that. So talking about the ownership of the assets, obviously it's one of the fundamental things of the Web3 integrations. But The thing that we want also to make understand to the people, to the users, and to the gamers in the end is that the Web3 gives a lot of possibilities in the industry. So let's say, for example, assets you have on a game, for example, on Steam. There are some games that let you sell, for example, assets and stuff like that, but you only earn credits, for example, that you can spend on Steam. And this is like a closed economy. And also one of the reasons that maybe platforms like Steam or others are not so friendly with Web3, because they can lose market doing that integrations. But talking about the player, the user experience, this is a very good upgrade because they will really own their assets and they can convert them in real money that they can spend in everything that they want, not only games in that platform. So the ownership will be one of the best thing that can happen to a player. And once they will understand and the user experience in the game will be easy to understand, the transition will be almost obvious, you know. In few years from now, we see in max 3 to 5 years from now that all the games will have some Web3 integrations. Maybe only in background, but there will be some connections to make the game work smoothly.
I think for us, this was a big topic. It took us many months to decide how we approach this, and it's not just in terms of communicating the ideas and the plans to the players, but also how do we actually design the system around player ownership of assets? Because at the end of the day, we have this PvP game, and the last thing you want is something that's perceived as pay to win, right? Like that just deters players from joining. And we still have ambitions of getting a lot of players on board. We still want to make sure that it's an approachable game. So first of all, the way we've designed the system is that the NFTs, the collectibles, are things that's around the game. So you don't own things directly in the game. You sort of own things on the meta layer, and these meta layers items does not directly have gameplay metrics on them. So that also allows us to continue to treat the game without having to worry about the prices of items and things like that. So we can make sure that we continue building a good game for the players. And because of that philosophy, I think it was easier for players to understand, okay, no one is just going to be able to buy their way to success or buy their way to winning the game. So that was an important part of this in terms of the design. And secondly, when it came time to tell our players that we're going into Web3, we approach it in a sort of tiered approach where we started. So instead of talking to, so we have a community of about 15,000 players on Discord, and instead of telling everyone at the same time, or even making an in-game announcement, which would go to, like a lot of people, we decided to start with our community staff. So we have about 20, 30 people that are volunteering in our community to sort of help moderate the server. So we started with the mods. So there's only about 5 of them. So we talked to them about the plan, make sure that they understood what we're doing, what our intentions are. And once they're on board, we spoke to the heroes. There's about a dozen of them. And then we spoke to the guardians, which again, about 25 of them. And the nice thing about this approach is by the time we got to speaking to a bigger crowd, everyone else that has a higher role could actually help us communicate our ideas to the community. So they were helping us answering questions. They were helping us helping other players understand what our intentions are, what our plans are. And as a result, we only received two people sort of pushed back on the idea. They really dislike blockchain. They really dislike NFTs. But by that point, there's so many sort of positive energy, I suppose, in the community that people sort of decided that they're on board with this plan, that we were able to get direct conversations with them. I recorded a few videos just answering questions, and then actually these two people ended up setting up wallet addresses and then send us their wallet address for NFT drops. We sort of turned them around to the idea of NFTs not necessarily being bad for the experience. So it wasn't we were a little bit sort of worried about the pushback, but I think we were in a fortunate position that the community we've built trust with them over the past couple of years, and also the plan is something that they can get on board with. So it wasn't a bad experience. We were actually pretty happy with that so far.
So from my perspective, I would agree with the Cobra, and I think like the way Steam treat the users is not actually really own the asset because they only able to sell on the Steam credit without any ability to withdraw it into other ecosystem. So I would agree like the way NFT trade should be like really decentralized. When someone sell the asset or sell the asset, anyone can use it on any chain or maybe any other game. Maybe as the time goes, like more games will get more interoperability with each other, and people get realize like NFTs really powerful things. Maybe in early times, like right now, we just like need more times. People actually understand what's NFT. This is what is my perspective. Maybe.
Just sorry, did I?
Go ahead, everybody.
All right. So another thing I forgot to mention was we were in a position where the community had created a lot of content based on the game, and our plan has always been to connect community contributions to the collectibles and using them in a way that encourages more activities. So we were able to kind of point to those and say to the community, we love what you're doing. Here are things that can help us get more out of these content. Like we can do more with it by way of utilizing this new technology. And I think that because we weren't focusing too much on the financial value of things, we're focusing on the things that they already enjoy and love doing. So that also helped reducing the number of pushbacks from the community.
This is really interesting about kind of community content because I'm personally very excited about UGC, and it kind of unlocks a lot of kind of organic user behaviors. We see kind of mods and user content being created in traditional games as well, but I think gamers are not as empowered around what it is they create, and it's kind of a one-way kind of value creation process where everything kind of goes to the game, and the creators and the gamers are not kind of as incentivized. So it's a really cool approach. I'm curious, once you decided that you're going to try and experiment and bring a game to Web3, how did you go about the process of kind of deciding on your technology stack, specifically the blockchain you were going to use? What was that process like, and what did you come to?
We started experimenting with all the major chains, and obviously we want fast transaction speed, we want low gas fees, and most of them can do that. Like, to be honest, after we experimented with them, the decision came down to one, which what tools are we most happy to work with, and this is down to my CTO. He sort of picked a couple that he enjoys using the most, and I think this is a lot of it is personal preference. But another thing that was important for us was the support we get from the chains. So by this point, we had established connections with people running these chains, and then there is certain chains are just a lot more responsive and supportive, and then great at making sure that we have what we need, great at making connections, and we just feel like this is a partnership that we have confidence in. And then the third thing that was a huge factor for us is looking at the markets, which chains have the most activities and sort of trading volumes for the kind of audience that we're looking at, and then which chains are most used in certain geographic locations that we're looking at. So those are the main considerations for us.
So talking about us for the blockchain, basically at the moment we still didn't finalize the final blockchain. We just released our first Genesis Pass collection on the Ethereum blockchain, but this is only our first NFT collection. For example, for in-game assets and also for our tokens in the future, we will choose a fast chain that can support a lot of users. So we are still choosing probably between the Binance Smart Chain or Polygon because we see that they are the best blockchains at the moment, considering the customer support and their communities basically. But we are aware that the future will be multi-chain. So most probably we will choose one base blockchain to develop all, but then we will also habilitate the users to actually buy our assets also on other chain. Let's say, for example, through chain linked integrations or stuff like that, because we know that in the future all the communities coming from a single blockchain will be interested to actually play the games that are maybe also in other blockchain. Because if we want to be one of the top titles on the crypto space gaming industry, we obviously have to target multiple chains, not only one. So it's correct to choose the best chain to start with, but with the look of a wider audience in the future.
For Metafish, maybe this question is more accurate for games project, but for Metafish, I think it's work on layer 3 as we offer service and we're still using it like a centralized system. The reason is like because players in Metafish doesn't need any wallet to start playing, and we took the custody of players using a Fireblock so they can focus playing the games rather than learning more on technical stuff. But if we have to choose, like I think we're gonna choose Polygon because of the speed and the cost is really cheap for the user. And I think the second option will be like Binance Smart Chain because in here in Asia and Indonesia especially, like most people really understand PSC very well. The cost is really cheap as well, and many people like just familiar with it at the moment.
And also one last thing that I want to add is that being able to build a game that is not 100% related to the blockchain. So let's say we saw some games like, for example, Star Atlas. I'm a big fan of them, but they are working with a game that is actually built on one blockchain. Okay, so you are closely related to this blockchain. For example, as we are choosing a different type of approach to the market. So we are building our game on a software you can actually download on your actual computer, and you will be able then to externally connect your wallet, for example, to your game account. So this is an option where you can onboard in this way you can onboard also users that come from another type of gaming, so the traditional gaming industry, that are not familiar with managing with a wallet and stuff like that. So it's always good to choose a blockchain, but the best thing is to actually be more similar to the traditional games to onboard also another piece of the cake of the traditional gaming market. So that's our idea.
I think like choosing what's the best blockchain is similar like choosing what's the best console for your games in Web2. So actually any console is working good, but we're gonna choose like what's the best infrastructure for the players and what's the best like what's the most user use at this time. So I think any blockchain will be good to use as long as they have enough infrastructure for the games to be there, I think.
One thing that was mentioned that was kind of interesting, but that I haven't heard mentioned before is kind of paying attention to geographic preferences. We tend to think of, our industry as distributed and centralized, and so, people are, people who live very far apart can be, in the digital space very close to each other. But, you do, mention that, certain, people coming from certain geographic areas do have a preference for certain blockchains and have more of a familiarity with certain blockchains. Does that factor into your go-to-market strategy as well? And kind of how does that work as you try to transition your games into Web3?
So regarding us, it's not a big deal because, as I mentioned, we are using probably Polygon or Binance Smart Chain that are the most used blockchain worldwide. And in the future, we have plans to go multi-chain. And one of the main reasons is also the one you mentioned, Ilya. So every people from every country, let's say they use more some blockchain instead of others, they will be available to actually purchase, trade, and actually play our game. Really not depending so much on the blockchain that they are used to actually work it. So going multi-chain solves also this problem in the future.
For us, it's really about reducing friction to onboard users. So if we have to ask someone in Asia to set up a chain that they're not already using, set up wallets that on a chain that they're not already using, then that's additional steps that we'll have to ask the players to do, which isn't ideal. And secondly, we have a very small team, so we like to leverage as much as possible any partnerships with the chains or with any local marketplaces or any sort of launchpads platforms that can help us establish some credibility. And I think that's quite important in this space because there have been a lot of projects, and sometimes it's a little bit hard to sort of filter out the noises. So so we always kind of joke that in a permissionless space and in a trustless environment, the trust becomes even more important, right? Because all of a sudden there's so many different choices now. So it's very much from a user experience perspective and also from business development perspective that we are evaluating different chains for different markets.
What has been some of the biggest challenges with this process of moving from Web2 to Web3? What have you struggled with, and what can you tell, like as I mentioned, this is a recorded session, so others may be listening after the fact. What would you tell game developers who are exploring the space right now to kind of help them kind of avoid some of the difficulties that you've struggled with as you were kind of going through your journey?
Okay, based on my observation, like the biggest challenge is the complexity required to start playing the games. I mean, like imagine 10 years old boy need to install MetaMask extension, saving the seed phrase on Vault, setting the CEX account, top up the gas fee from CEX account, transferring to token, learning about all the game mechanism, and all of this compared with, for example, like a Tetris in Web2, it's just way so far different, right? So I think we need to make simplified all the technical things and make user experience way more smooth and easier to start with.
So talking about the hard parts of getting into these integrations, the biggest obstacle is obviously the reach from the traditional gaming industry. So connecting the platforms like PlayStation, Xbox, and Steam with an actual game that is going to be also on the Web3 industry. So a direct connection is not possible at the moment. So we cannot release basically a game on this platform with Web3 integration. So we find an external way to actually connect. So basically what we are doing, we are releasing two products. So we will release a single player game that is going to be on PlayStation, Xbox, and Steam. And with this game, we are going to attract traditional gamers to our ecosystem. And then the next year, by the end of the next year, we will release the multiplayer player version of the game, at least the first beta. And with this game, we are going to start also an informational campaign that that want to actually convert the traditional gamers, so our single player users, to let them understand that they can monetize their time. So while they are playing the game, and they can earn tokens and NFTs doing that. So they will be incentivized to actually change from the traditional gaming industry to the multiplayer play and earn industry. Obviously, we will have only a portion of that users that will come to our actual multiplayer play and earn game, but it will be a new thing for the market. So this will be, I think, the hardest part to do, but also the most promising one, because no one actually did that. So at least as I know, right now we are the first project that aims to do something like this. So release a product on the traditional gaming industry and then aim to convert a portion of its users in a multiplayer play and earn game. So this will be probably the biggest struggles, but we already have a lot of ideas and plans to how to do that successfully.
So I echo the points that's made before me, and especially on the user experience part. That's something that we had noticed, that it's even though we when we did our first job with Fractal, and they provided a nice tool sets for us and an easy way to log in and set up wallets. It's still quite confusing for a lot of our players. So I think there's something that just be aware of when you start integrating your game with Web3 tech, because it is a new process that your players will have to understand. Another thing that we try to get better at is, now that with NFTs, we're not designing one game, we're designing an entire ecosystem. And there are so many things you can do, that I think the challenge is in one, designing something that makes sense for all the different parts, be it integration with tournaments to fan contents to multiple experiences, all the sort of interoperability part of the equation, but also choosing what to focus on. So, for example, right, like people might come to us and ask about tokens, NFT stakings, how do you work with guilds, and these are all very important questions that we want to address. But at the same time, with a small team, we kind of have to focus on a few things first. And because I think blockchain opens up so many different possibilities, and when we're in the industry, we read about all these amazing games doing interesting things. We kind of feel like, oh, we should be doing that as well. But I think keeping our heads down and just focusing on what we need to do at various stages. I think that's been an interesting challenge. Just trying not to get too distracted with every new thing.
I'm curious, I think Cobra, you might have mentioned Steam as part of kind of your approach, and this kind of brings up an interesting topic of distribution platforms, right? For traditional games, if you're mobile, you have the App Store, the Google Play Store. If you're going for more kind of desktop, or you're going for Steam or Epic, there's a few other kind of distribution platforms. Now, for Web3 games, that discovery space is a little bit more nebulous. It's a little bit more challenging to get into the app stores. It's a little bit more challenging to get on, in Steam. There's a lot of compromises games are looking to do to kind of adhere to their rules and standards. What are your thoughts about kind of distribution, and how are you thinking about traditional distribution platforms? And what are you seeing in this space evolving for more organic Web3 distribution channels?
Please go. Okay. Do you want to go, Brandon?
Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so I will go. Don't worry. So talking about the distribution platforms, actually there are some big names in the crypto gaming industry, but there are still very small compared to the traditional gaming distribution platforms. So what we see as a company, as Haunted Space, is that the traditional gaming industry will merge with the Web3. So there will be integrations like we are seeing right now that big companies like Ubisoft, Epic Games are joining also the Web3 integration. Epic Games just released the first Web3 integrated project that it is Blancos, if I'm correct. And so, by the way, we also won an Epic Mega Grant from them. So we are pretty well connected with Epic Games, and we know that they are open to the Web3 integration. So more than new platforms that are going to raise up, we think that there will be a movement from the traditional gaming platform to the Web3 world. So the leaders in the old industry, if they are fast enough to join this industry, will be the leaders also in this new industry. Maybe only some of them, because the blockchain, the Web3 will be a big change also in the gaming industry. So only some of them will be fast enough to actually take their place in the new market that is building right now. By the way, there are also some other notable names, like, for example, Gal Games or other very well-known platforms that are taking their place on the Web3 marketplaces for Web3 games. So it will be, a new market that is going to build up in the next 2-3 years max.
When it comes to distribution and platforms, I think our take is that there are places where we have more control over the distribution, and there are places that we don't have as much control over. And because it feels like everything is still evolving in terms of, let's say, the app store's attitude towards crypto games. I think Epic's position is pretty clear. Steam, they aren't too keen on it at the moment, but that could change. So I think it's important for us to just keep an eye on the distribution channels and adjust the product accordingly as much as we can. And because what we're doing is the sort of NFT part of the game can be kind of replaced or sort of hidden away from the main game, because a lot of that is on the community side of things, and a lot of that is on the meta side of things. So we are keeping an eye on this, and then trying to make sure that we continue to have distribution while not breaking any of their rules. So we are we've spoken to the big app stores of the world to understand like where they draw the line, and we've seen some examples of how some of these bigger blockchain games are able to continue having their mobile apps while operating their Web3 side of things. But again, like it's I think it's not just for Web3 games, but for free-to-play games in general, distribution is a big topic at the moment, right? With all the changes around advertisements on the phones. So I think a lot of moving parts, but it's also kind of one of the things about Web3 is we are expecting that the community will also help with with distribution, with promotion, and just in terms of like sharing the game with their friends. So virality and all the other things that we are paying more attention to, other than the purely sort of UA side of things on mobile.
Are you following then kind of some of the more traditional metrics, cost of acquisition, lifetime value, you mentioned virality, are you looking for those traditional metrics when you're evaluating kind of your kind of your potential market, your potential kind of user base? Is this something that plays into effect, or are there more kind of Web3 native metrics that you're now starting to consider?
That's an interesting one, because we started adding a lot of deep links into the game, so you can share a link with other people to start a game or to spectate on matches or to add people as friends. So some of these sort of more social media style kind of features are going into the game. But we're also seeing transactions and how people are starting to use our very first NFT, which we airdropped to a few hundred of our most loyal players. And it's interesting to see how they're using that. So we'll definitely need to start tracking that more, and then to see how people are trading them, how people are using the NFTs, and how do we encourage more trading and collecting mechanisms. So we haven't found any existing tools that can help with that. So if anyone knows, please let me know. But it's definitely something that we need to do. We need to start doing more, and we're planning to do more of that once we have our Genesis sets released.
So talking about the matrix that we are going to analyze, for us it's a little bit different because we are going to release the two products. So one for the traditional gaming industry and one for also the play and earn industry. So we are taking in consideration both of the things. So we studied for the crypto space. We studied all the old let's say the old generation of games, or even if old is like 1 year ago, but crypto move fast. So we studied them and we are now collecting data. So we just launched our Genesis Pass collection a few days ago, and we are starting to collect data on that to do some expectations of the next sales, the next NFTs released, and also the users that will join our game once it's ready. And for the traditional gaming industry, instead, we already did these evaluations when we were building the game only for the traditional gaming industry. So we already made like comparative charts with other games. For example, we are building a space game, and our nearest competitor is Everspace, that is a very well-known game, and also other names. And we choose also to build a space game in a different way from them, to have some unique points that can benefit also the user experience and also the attraction from other games in the future. So yeah, the metrics on the market are very, very important, because before actually building a game, you need to understand where are we going to be in this gaming niche, and how the market responded to other games that build something similar to you. So yeah, these are fundamental things, and we used this data also to do our company valuations, and also to choose the proper valuation for our token on the market. So I think that the era of overvalued projects, like we saw in the past, crazy valuation like 50 millions, 100 millions of valuation for a token that has no value because there isn't even a game that is ready to play. These days are ended, in our opinion. So we need now to focus on games, projects that have a real value behind, and with some real data to support that valuations, because otherwise it will be only just another pump and dump like the many ones that we saw in the last year. So yeah, these data are very, very important, and will be more required in the future for the analysis of the new projects that are joining the industry.
For us, actually, we are taking a look at both statistics, both Web2 and Web3, since our target is players and the managers, the players who doesn't know about in blockchain at all. So we're taking a look at Web2 statistic, like how many potential players that we could get. And while for the managers, it's actually like a guild or player who have more experience, like trying to rent the asset for the players. So actually, we are looking at the Web3 asset, how many assets available in the market to be rented for the Web2 players. So we definitely taking a look at those statistics from Web2 and Web3 that available in the market.
I'm curious to follow up on this because there was a lot of mentioning of data, right? And how we need to analyze data, as part of the, kind of gaming industry. But with the transition from Web2 to Web3, we now have two different types of data, right? We have kind of the traditional off-chain data, and now the on-chain data that is aggregating and kind of being available now. The process of kind of reading and interacting with on-chain data can be rather cumbersome sometimes. And so I'm curious, how do you think about on-chain data? What do you use it for? What do you intend to use it for?
So I think because the way we imagine our collectibles to be used, a lot of it is tied to community activities. For example, tournaments. So we have started seeing players using the NFTs as tournament rewards or tournament entry fees. So I think the current challenge is how do we tie the activities with the transactions that we're seeing on chain, because it's not like when we see an NFT exchanging hands on chain, we don't know why it's being transferred. So I think the challenge for us at the moment is how do we make those connections. But if we just look at the on-chain data itself, it sort of gives us an idea of how people are valuing the project in some ways. And I think it's probably a pretty sort of basic thing to observe. But knowing that there is somewhat of a demand for something that's coming out, or if people are on board with some of the ideas that we're designing, I think that's one way we're currently looking at it. The other thing and this is more from a game design perspective, which is we are seeing people collecting specific numbered cards. So the cards are the same, but they have different serial numbers. And so some people want to collect all the ones that the digits are the same. So it's given us some insights into this. I think I mentioned earlier, this collector mentality, this sort of new type of user that doesn't necessarily play the game, but they just like collecting things. So it gives us some insight into that and how much people are willing to pay for that fun. I think how do we put a value on the fun that people are getting from collecting things? And it was difficult before, but now we kind of have a way of validating that through these on-chain data. So this is what we've seen so far. I think once we have sets and different crafting mechanisms, then all of a sudden the on-chain data becomes even more important in terms of what we can feed that back into the game design. What kind of crafting systems work better than others? So I think that will become more and more clear once we have that in place, and I think that's quite exciting as well.
Yeah. So for regarding us, we think that the on-chain data will be used every time more. So obviously it will be new things to analyze, but the most important data that we have right now are not basically the on-chain data, at least for the moment, because we didn't release the actual game, so we can only evaluate numbers on things that already happen. But we can do some let's say provision statistics once we have some real data. For example, the ones that we are acquiring with our first Genesis Pass collection. And in the future, the on-chain data will be used, as Brandon mentioned, in the game. So considering the game matrix, all the movements that a standard player makes inside our game and stuff like that. So it will be another layer of information that a project can use to actually perform better in the game, do some extra calculation to improve the user experience, and extra stuff to work with to build something that is even better for the users. So more info do you have, more numbers you can analyze, the more it's clear what a user is doing, and what you can do to make him entertain even more in the game, make him spend more and pass more time inside the game. So in the end, all this data will be useful to develop the game that is more appealing to the user.
Oh, so actually for Metabase, we still doing most of the transaction off chain, but I don't think like the on chain data will be interesting for some user because they're looking for certain number, for example, like 999 or something like that. But I also thought like it is impossible to put everything on chain because it's gonna make the game's performance a little bit slower than uh, versus off chain. So I think maybe it's just not now, but later in further development and more infrastructure, when things are settled, yeah, on-chain will be more interested for me and most people.
Bit of technical difficulties there, I think. But we have reached the top of the hour, and at the end, I always like to ask speakers, what is it that you're kind of most excited about in the coming months about the, kind of the Web3 gaming space? So if you would just kind of go around and say one thing you're super excited about, that'd be great.
I'm most excited about seeing what our players are going to do with the collectible cards. I think we've seen some really interesting stuff that they've come up with in the past. Someone was trying to port the game to a TI calculator before, things like that. So I think we're pretty excited about once we get these cards and these collectibles into the players' hands, what they're going to do with it. I think that's something we're really looking forward to.
So for the next steps in the industry, obviously, the new marketplace is like the one that we mentioned before, the big companies that are joining the crypto space, the support that the Web3 world is gaining despite of the market condition, but the tech is growing up, and the most important thing, I think, the tech is going to develop even more. So in our perfect world, let's say, we will have some Web3 integrations that let the user join a game without even seeing what's behind, but they are using Web3 without even know that. And this, in our opinion, will be the final step to bring the blockchain to the masses. And obviously, once this will be reached with some technical stuff that is secure, and with a lot of users that are using that, this will be the final step to actually attract the big names in the industry to the Web3 world. And once this happens, there will be some of the big names that will join this space, and other ones that will be left behind. We will probably see in the next 3 to 5 years some new blockbusters on the market. So some old companies that didn't want to make the change and will be left behind from other ones that are more, more focused on what's happening after that. So. I really hope that new tech integrations will happen also for the Web3 gaming and basically the user interface. So to bring the user experience to a new level where maybe you don't even have to create your own wallet, save all the stuff that you need. At least you can do that, and you can also do in the standard way, so you can have your own wallet. But to give the chance to the users to build something in an easier way is also beneficial for the actual project and all the gaming industry.
Yeah, so for me, it's actually I'm really agree with Cobras, which is most games out there right now is only focusing on the tokenomics rather on the gameplay. So I guess like most game like a triple A takes few years to develop, and I think in the coming months or coming years, and most of games that really focusing on the gameplay will be start raising, and in this period time, is people really being tested that only the one who focus on building the actual quality will survive in the next few months or years. That's for me.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. That takes us to the top of the hour. Thank you, everybody who came. Thank you, speakers, for sharing your thoughts. As mentioned, this is a recorded space, so we will post this later after the fact. Thank you, everyone. And as you know,